Hey there everyone, my name's Andrew and this is Canadian Starships. Welcome back to another update on the Enterprise E project. This is update number 23 and I am back at it after our son was born early morning on January 2nd. We are a household full of diaper changes, feedings, cryings, and sleepless nights, although he's doing pretty good at that, so we're pretty fortunate that way. We are also under a lockdown here in Ontario. We're actually going into a stay-home order tomorrow as of the time of recording this intro video, and kids are doing school online from home, which adds a whole nother layer to life here since my junior kindergarten daughter cannot be on the computer and manage all that by herself, so somebody has to be there with her. But in spite of all of that, I am actually getting back to the Enterprise E project, and I would like to be able to say that this will be the last or the second last video, but I've been very bad at prognosticating that kind of thing. But I have made some progress since you saw this last, unless of course you follow my updates online. So I'm going to show you that. I am also going to show you something that I bought thanks to inspiration and encouragement from fellow YouTuber and model builder John Robert Child, who has the Captain's Dry Drop channel. He purchased a silhouette Cameo 4 and had really good success with that, and so seeing what he's been able to do, I went out and ordered my very own silhouette Cameo 4 in order to do some of the masking work on this project and other projects down the road. So I'm going to show that to you. I'm going to show you the progress I've made on the Enterprise E, and I'm going to actually start to apply some of the masking that I've created to do a little bit of the detail on the I guess the best way I could describe these things are the gills, kind of like the triangular sections either side of the neck, top and bottom of the saucer. So I'm going to show you that and the other detail that I've been able to do. So let's get at it. But before we get started, why not take a moment and click the subscribe button, and while you're here, click on that notification bell so you don't miss a single video. So you can see a little bit of a preview of the work I've been doing with the Aztecing in here, but most of it is covered up in order to do the masking on what I can only really call the gills of the ship. So I've got some medium gray laid down, and I've got the masks covering it now so that the medium gray is what's going to show up underneath the darker gray that's going to go over top of this. So these shapes in here are all part of the mask I created, and then I printed off some 0.5 millimeter pinstriping to do the pinstripe around the edge, and I've just hand laid that in. At first I tried to make it part of the mask of this whole area, but it's going to work out a lot better just having the really thin pinstripe masking and laying that down by hand. It's going to look so much better than trying to wrangle a shape cut out like that. So I've got this on both sides. I'm going to lay down the darker gray, and then I'll pull those masks up and you'll be able to see how that's turned out. I'm interested to see how it's going to turn out as well. So here's a look at all the detail on the underside of the saucer that I've been able to do. These are those sections that I had masked off, those gills I was talking about. It's turned out really nicely, and then there's all this Aztec detailing here. I'm going to zoom in a little bit more on this Aztec detailing so that you can really see the amount of work that's kind of gone into this. This is all hand masked, just little tiny pieces of tape that have been cut and laid down to shape. There is a little bit of touch-up work to do, but all in all, it is looking really nice. I am so happy with the way this has turned out. Also, I created some masks on my cutter to do the eyebrows, because I did them with tape before and they didn't quite turn out the way I was hoping. So I now have some masks for those dark gray triangle eyebrows, as they're called, on the front there. A couple things to show you on the top saucer here. First of all, I've got the first bit of Aztec detailing done on the top. I learned from last time that I wanted to get this color scheme done first because I need to lay down some of the light gray in this area, then mask it off, and then top spray it with the base coat again. And it's a lot easier with the masking for everything else on the ship if I do that section first. Also, I've started to do some of the pinstripe masking on this front ring section of the ship. Now, what I've used for this is vinyl strips cut on the vinyl cutter. And the vinyl that is, let's see, up here, this stuff is 0.5 millimeter, and it just looked a little bit too big on the model. So I've downsized that to the 0.33 millimeter, which I think is at the extreme range of the small set the printer can cut. So it's come in really handy. It is really fiddly work getting the pattern down, getting this pinstriping straight and looking the way it's supposed to. But I think this is going to turn out really nice once I get the paint onto that. So I've got to finish that all around the edge of the saucer, and then I will do the Aztec detailing in these spaces that are still open, and then we'll lay down that I think it's a bit of a darker light gray that goes around the edge. I'm gonna have to double check that with my reference material. So hopefully you can see on here that I have been doing all of the pinstriping around, and it's quite an intricate pattern that I've got going. And you'll notice that the port side is symmetrical to the starboard side. Although I have discovered that on the kit, the windows aren't exactly symmetrical side to side. And considering that I've been using the windows to help line up where these things should go, that's made working on this a little bit tricky. Here is the vinyl strips that I've been cutting on my vinyl cutter. And one of the things I've discovered is that they do print slightly different widths, even though I've set it up to print at the same width on the program. So that's just a function of the machine, I think. But it's not too bad. I'm getting pretty much the thickness of pinstriping that I am wanting. I thought I would do some of this on camera to show you just exactly how I'm laying this down. And there's a couple tools that are important. Well, one, this is the pinstriping. It's very, very, very narrow. Very fine tweezers and very fine pointy scissors are the tools for this particular job. So this is essentially how it's going down. It's a little finicky, the placement to start, and sometimes it's easier to use my fingers, sometimes it's easier to use the tweezers, but ultimately whichever tool gets it in place best is the tool I end up using. So I'm going to grab my scissors. I'm going to cut this about where it's supposed to be cut, and there we go. Nicely laid down. I'm going to do the edges here. I'm just going to move this a little closer to the edge so I've got a little bit of space to work. It's a little harder doing this on camera so you can see it. And I'm just going to not be too precise there because I need to cut this thing to length first. There we go. And you can't see off camera, but I've got a small arrow, post-it note arrow on my desk. So I've got a few different strands of this stuff. There's slight differences in the thickness. And I've got an arrow that points towards which of the strands I'm using right now. And there's something that happens. I've just lost the teeny weeny piece. So I'm going to cut myself a new one. I've lost a lot of tiny pieces of pinstripe. There we go. Grab the tweezers. Here we are. Lay it down. This is finicky and detailed oriented work. So essentially, this is how it goes. Now that all the pinstriping is in place, I've actually gone ahead and done a bunch of the Aztec detailing around the edge here, but I thought I'd show you how I'm going about placing down the Aztec detailing in this section here. So over on the side, which you may or may not be able to see on camera very well, I've got just a pile. I'll bring it over so you can see. I've just got a bunch of different width thicknesses of tape that I am cutting to put on the model. So I just grab what I think is going to be a good piece to start. And they're very, very tiny. I'm just going to lay this on where I think it might look decent, and takes a little bit of work just to make sure that it is straight in line with where it wants to go. Then I'll take a different piece. In this case, I'm going to take a very thin piece, but a little bit longer. And I'm going to place it down here, and it's actually going to go up beside these windows a little bit, nice and straight. I might grab a small piece and throw it. We'll put it going down here on the edge. Oh, that looks good. Half of it's just where it happens to plop down. As long as it's in line, looks good with no gaps. And let's throw a piece over on this side under these windows. And actually, I'm going to just change this around so it's sitting vertical here. And now I have a few detail pieces in place. Now there's a larger section over here, so I get to play around with that a little bit more. Just gonna opt for a medium thickness piece, and I'm gonna plop it down here, make sure it's straight. It looks decent. Let's grab a slightly narrower piece, about the same length. I'm going to put it just right beside it, and this is a common pattern you see on the filming model. And I'm trying to replicate as much as I can those common shapes you see. It's pretty much impossible to replicate it perfectly to match, but you want the themes going along with what they look like. Let me grab a nice, a bit of a longer narrow piece. Plop it down here. Straighten it up. Like that. And I think that needs a small piece attached to it on the end. Just like that. So here's a nice close-up look at the sections I've just put on. But I thought I would do this section just a little bit closer. It's really hard to see on such small detail. So let's get started with the bottom section there. Just going to put a piece down here. Make sure it is all straight. And I'm going to put a little bit of a wider piece, just based on what I think might work, what might fit. and toss it on the end here. Actually, I'm going to flip it. Make sure everything is lined up and straight, which I can see it's not yet. There we go. Nice little detail piece there. And let's grab a narrow piece. And I'm going to grab my fine point tweezers. Lay that down. Adjust it to look right. There we go. Take another piece. I'm going to attach it to the top. Line it up a little bit better. And let's go with a nice little square piece. And just dump it on the end. And just make a nice little hooked detail. Essentially, that's how the whole process goes. And that's the way it's done for each and every one of these. And for all of these up here too. Exact same process. Showing you the results of all of the masking work I did. And actually, it's quite a number of days later, probably about a week later. And this is the result. And this is actually the result of a second go. All of the masking I did, I laid down the paint, pulled the masking, and I was not happy with the way it looked. So I took some sandpaper, sanded down the entire ring, and started from scratch. And the only difference between what I showed you and what I actually did for this result was, instead of using the vinyl that I cut on the machine, I used a different type of tape, and I used that for the Aztec masking as well. Also, you may notice that this section here is a little bit different. You might be wondering why it looks different. Well, the fact is, I made a little mistake. Call it baby brain from having an infant and lack of sleep around. But I did this ring with this inverted Aztec detail instead of this one. And I suddenly realized when I was looking at the reference material, and I'm like, oh, I've got to do this whole thing over again. But I'm actually much happier with how this section turned out, and so much happier with how this section turned out. I will show you a little bit closer on the pin striping, and it's just much clearer, much more defined, looks a whole lot better. Now, some people have been commenting that the coloring looks rather light, and what I'm doing is working off of the studio model, which is what the client is hoping to have, kind of the studio model mixed with what it looks like on screen. And it does look darker on screen than the studio model does. This is actually a fairly light gray. This is darker than what the studio model is. And this will actually look darker once the rest of the Aztecing is on. There'll be much less of this base insignia white color showing. And so the overall look of the ship will look darker once all of the detail painting is on. So I'm going to be moving up to this next section here, which goes around to the other side as well. And that's going to be interesting because I have to figure out the exact placement for the escape pods that go in these two sections. So I'm going to take the decals that I have for the kit, I'm going to scan them in, and I'm going to create vinyl masks off of the decals so that I know that they are the perfect size, and I'm going to use them as my placement areas here and the masking off for the sections where the lifeboats are going to go, so that I have a guide when I'm laying down the pinstriping and masking for this section here. So this section here, and the same on the other side, and this front section, let me just move it over there and focus for you. I'm on manual focus because it does so much better. This section over here where we've got the 4 big windows masked off, those are all the same color and the same type of masking. So I'm going to do this whole ring around in masking. Then I'm going to paint that off, and then we'll be working on this mega section in here, which is a whole ton of Aztecing and masking work, which is going to be interesting. I'm actually going to go over and redo the phaser strips after. It was just too much work trying to meticulously mask those off anytime I was getting up close to them. So I'm going to just leave them now, and I'll go back over them with the gray once everything else is done, which I think is going to work out quite well. So I'm going to start working on the masking for the lifeboats, and I will show you those when I've got those laid down in their proper places. So I spent some time in the Vinyl Cutter software, and I was able to make these masks that go down where the escape pods will go, and you can see the escape pods there on the decal sheet. And so what this is going to do is it's going to protect the insignia white that's underneath. It's going to give me the kind of like the guideline on where I'm going to pinstripe and mask for the panel sections that are going to be painted in along here and around on the other side. So those aren't necessarily just for painting. They're also to give me the guideline on where the panel goes up to when I'm laying down the masking and the pinstripe masking and the Aztec masking on this ring. So that's what I'm going to get working on next. Before I wrap things up today, I wanted to take a moment and show you what the base is going to look like. This is the prototype base. This is done in a walnut, and it will also have a rock maple option, and I'll give that choice to my client, see which one he wants. But this is essentially the prototype, what it will look like from looking from the top down. And on the bottom of the delta is where the switch and the jack is going to be, which you can see kind of laying there. The next photo is of the interior cavity, and there'll be a cover plate that goes over top of that, and inside of here will be where all the wiring from the post comes into the base and is connected to the control board, which will also be housed inside the base here. So it's going to be really nice looking. It's going to be a good solid base, and again, it's either going to be in the walnut or the rock maple, the walnut being the dark one here and the rock maple being a lighter color. And that's going to wrap it up for this update. Not as much work as I thought I was going to get done, but that's what happens when you have a newborn in the house. And he just turned a month yesterday, so lots of sleepless nights, diaper changes, all that kind of thing. I'm really happy with the way things are turning out, so that is really good. I hope that you enjoyed the demonstration in this video. If you did and enjoyed the rest of the video, please make sure that you hit that like button. If you're new to my channel or you haven't done so yet, why not hit that subscribe button today? You'll make me very happy if you do. For now, I'm Andrew, and this is Canadian Starships. Have a great day, everyone.